Thanks for watching the Silver River Chairs channel. Today we're going to install a pressed cane seat. We have a piece of cane webbing soaking. It's soaked for about 10 or 15 minutes in warm tap water. You don't want to let it soak too long because it can turn gray and get smushy. And you don't want it to soak too little because then it can be dry and it can break. Overall process is going to take about 2 hours. This is not something you can really leave and go answer the phone and come back to 10-15 minutes later. It is kind of like installing a screen in a door. So you have your panel of rattan and you are going to press it into that groove with wedges. Wedges, hammers, you don't have to use a hammer, you can just push it in. So not every wedge is made alike and not every chair is made alike. So sometimes you'll need a thicker wedge for a bigger groove, and sometimes you'll have really teeny tiny grooves and you'll need a teeny tiny wedge. There's a lot of hammering going on in this, so you really do want to use a smaller hammer. You'll start to get some fatigue in your arms. So find your appropriate size wedge for your seat. Grab your panel of cane out of the water. I've got my spline sitting out next to the bucket, but I'm not going to soak that yet. So I usually wait to soak the spline until I'm almost ready to use it. Your supplier can help you figure out what size cane you need for your chair and what size spline. Frank's Supply out in California has a really good method of figuring out what size spline you need using coins. One thing I do suggest though is order more than you need, especially if it's your first chair. Maybe even order double what you need, because if you mess up and it breaks, you're going to have to order again, and that's twice the shipping. The shipping on this can be just as expensive as the material. Same thing with the spline. Try getting a couple of different sizes of spline. That way, if your spline over soaks, you can always use another one. One thing you want to do before you start doing the installation is to take down the sharp edge along the sides here. You want to cut around so you have about 2 inches all around the groove. You want to try to align the pairs just before the groove on either side and try to get it so that I can see the space. You want to look kind of down the chair, think about how it looks in relation to the center of the chair back. Sometimes your cane is not straight and sometimes your chair is not straight. It's going to shift. So do the best you can. Keep checking your alignment up and down the chair as well as looking down over the groove to make sure you're even. Starting in the back in the middle, I'm just going to hammer slightly. Not trying to get the cane to go into the groove immediately on the first go. That's the best way to break your cane. So I'm going to bend a little in the back. Now I'm going to move to the front. It shifted on me, so I have to realign. I'm going to cut this corner off. Make sure it's lined up over there. I'm going to cut some strands here. I'm going to cut this corner. I'm going to cut this corner. I'm going to cut this corner too. There's a string here, which is part of the loom weaving process. I'm going to get rid of that. Quite a different panel than we had before. I'm going to try it again. Anytime your cane keeps shifting, it means you probably need to score something. What I mean is to snip some of these double rows so that they're not popping the cane back out. Just snip a little at a time. That wants to pop out. You know what that means? Got to get rid of some cane there. Try it again. Haha, now it's wanting to stay. Still not muscling it all the way down to the bottom of the groove. Check front and back. If at any point you start to get nervous that your material is drying out, just grab your water bottle and spritz it. You want to keep moving from the middle out to the side, the middle out to the side, the middle out to the side on all 4 sides. Get right up on it so you can see if you're about to break something. Looking a little poofy here in the front, I can fix that. So here you can see that the back is fitting in really neatly, and the front here is a bit poofy. So I might have to pop that out, not the whole thing, that was a pain to get in, but I'll pop this out, spritz it down, and work on it a little more. Maybe I'll take out some more of these pieces so that they're not pulling the cane back. But I still don't think it's quite secure enough to do that, so I'm gonna work on these sides. The side looks like it's going in pretty easy. That's not going in easily, so I'm gonna give it a snip. Give that a snip too for good measure. More off there. Be especially careful at the corners. There's a lot of material here. If you haven't already, give it a snip so that it doesn't pull on the tension in the weave. I'm not really using the whole wedge. I'm just kind of hitting 2 strands at a time. It's definitely a slow and steady kind of process. I feel like I might need to wet it. So this is what it's starting to look like. I do feel like it's a little loose here in the front where it feels really tight in the back. So I'm gonna pop this out. See how easy it came out? And spray it down really well. I didn't pop the whole thing out. You can see it's kind of secure in there, even though it's not hitting the groove in a lot of places. Because this was bent, I want to kind of reform it with my hands. Just massage out the bend you created before. And now you can start over, now that it's not going to shift in the back and on the sides. So you don't want to put your elbow in like that or put your hand in like this. Obviously that's going to mess with your tension too. So it's looking good. Kind of just barely flattened it with my hand. And starting a row of 2 to the next row of 2, row of 2 to the next row of 2. It kind of popped up. I got to watch it. Maybe I'll angle it this way. Maybe I'll angle it like that. And that's getting there. That feels better. Aha! Check that out. So once I have most of it in, I just kind of gently tap around the whole perimeter. Anything that wants to pop up, still not wanting to get down, give it a snip. I'm going to snip this here. I feel like that's where the tension is coming from. Maybe a little here. Continue around the perimeter of the chair until your cane panel hits the bottom. You'll hear it. It makes a distinctive kind of louder thunk when it hits. Do you hear that? And also be careful when you're pulling it out. If you pull it out, you might pop some strands out. So just kind of rock the wedge. So here you can see the cane panel is pressed in. I'm barely tapping it from the bottom. It's not going anywhere. I'm tapping it on the top. It feels pretty tight. I still need to push the cane more into the groove. To do that, I'm going to use a paint scraper putty knife. You do want to be careful that it's not too sharp. If your cane is already mostly in the groove, then you should be fine. Also be sure it has a metal top. That way when you hammer on it, it doesn't crack and split down and you ruin your tool. You heard it hit that time. That's the sound you want to hear, but you don't want to muscle it. Even with this tool, even though it was mostly all the way in, you still want to gently keep tapping. If your cane breaks in the bottom of the groove, it's not going to have much to grip onto. So you really want to be careful. You want the cane to go all the way up and around so the cane is on this side, the underside, and the outside of the groove. I'm going to work on these corners a little bit more. The screwdriver, that's what I started with. Some wedges, you heard it, and a screwdriver, and a hammer. And it's not the end of the world if you break cane at the edge. You can always patch it, but you don't really want a bunch of patches all around your chair. Got the spline soaking, and now we want to get all the excess cane from around the outside of the groove. I'm just going to give this a quick little spritz. As you're cutting, you want to keep going around with this. Keep this handy. You'll need this. And you'll need something to cut with. Here's what we cut with. Chisels or a utility knife. It kind of depends. I started cutting the cane webbing with a utility knife. A fresh blade, it goes pretty fast. You have to push this down and cut right at the back edge of the groove. Now that's tricky because look how dangerously close to my fingertips I'm going with a fresh utility. So over time, I've come to use chisels. Now with chisels, you can jump the back and scratch your chair. You can chunk out a bit, so you want to be really careful. As with anything, you're not trying to muscle it on the first go. You can see this angle. You heard it hit the back there. Move over a little. And I follow back with this putty knife and make sure that what remains is as far down into the groove as possible. Now I'm not going too far down, nor am I going right at the edge, which can chip the back of the chair. If you do chip off some of your chair, just hold it aside, put it in a little baggie. You can always glue it on later. It happens. When you pull the cane away, you're just really trying to get the loose stuff. If you pull too hard, you can pop the panel out. Follow back with the putty knife. You don't get any bonus points for keeping your chair in the same position the whole time. Move your chair around. You don't want to be chiseling toward yourself. Very dangerous. You don't want to be leaning over the edge of the chair, chiseling this way. Now we are ready for the corners. For the corners, I'd have a smaller size chisel and we can work our way into that corner. Definitely want to push down the material with a wedge or your screwdriver. Make sure the cane is hitting the bottom of the groove before you cut it off. Any of these little stragglers we can get up with a utility knife. You just want to hold it there and pull the cane against it. Pull the cane against the blade. You're not moving, potentially slicing your chair or yourself. You're holding and pulling. Hold and pull. One guy here needs to go. All right. So, beautiful, clean chair. So now that we've finished cutting off all of the excess, I want to go around one more time, make sure all the material is hitting the bottom of the groove. It is drying, and when it dries, it shrinks, and so it could be pulling itself out. This is definitely not the time to go have a sandwich. So I'm going to leave about an inch over. I've got my finger marking it. I'm going to leave an inch over so I can back off and just get rid of this excess. Before we add glue, we want to go around and see that there's not anything broken along this edge. If there is, then that piece of cane can wiggle out and start to make your chair seat collapse. Right here, you can see this vertical strand. If you sit here on the edge of the chair, that piece is going to eventually work its way back and your chair will start to fail along this front edge. Now I've found that the diagonal strands are actually the better quality strands. This will be tricky with the camera resting on the chair like this, but we'll see how it goes. So you get your strand of cane that you took out from the excess at the beginning. You get a pokey tool and you're going to lift. This is your broken piece. It's being tucked under here, under these two, and you slide it over. Grab your new piece and you can use it to fish this end out. You want to leave at least 3 or 4 inches. I usually do a little bit longer. You can just push that in to the bottom of the groove. Anything that sticks out, we can just cut with an X-Acto knife. I like to just start here. You're placing it, you're not jamming the wedge down. When you come to the rounded corner, you want to angle the wedge this way. That way it can force the spline into that far corner. Another corner, angle it out. It went in relatively easy. I am a little bit concerned that the groove is so deep. I might pop this out and add a little round reed. You can also, if you have extra spline, you can slice off a little bit at the bottom and line the bottom with some extra reed. You don't want this to go too far down into the groove. So I pressed the spline into the groove. I've got a flat wedge and a hammer. I'm going to tap around. Now I just need to cut off this excess. Got all 4 corners relatively snug. You will need a piece of mat board, an X-Acto knife, or a chisel, or a cutting board. You have to get right on top of it. You want the edge of your paper or mat board to hit the beginning edge of the spline. You're not gonna cut. You're gonna get right on top of it and you're just gonna score it. You're not gonna cut it, you're just gonna make a little line. I'm gonna scooch this back in, find the line, back the spline off of the cane panel. You don't want any accidents. And then pops right off. And then work it the rest of the way in with the wedge. Dang, that turned out pretty good. If it's too big, it's gonna bump your spline out. If it's too small, you'll have a little gap. You can fill that gap if you want to, but really that trick just works almost every time. So here it is. Pretty perfect, if I do say so myself. These guys here will patch in after it's dried. This horizontal strand needed to be patched. You don't want to do patches while the glue is still drying because you could pull the cane out of the groove even with the spline in. Now that it dried overnight, I had to re-wet it, and I just took this rag, inched it up right to the edge where it broke, and then wrapped it. So the whole strand and everything beneath it gets wet. Has to be pliable. You don't want to break anything now. You've already spent so much time. So now you can see it's wobbly, but that's going to dry out again. Being careful not to bend it all the way back. I'm going to put a tiny dab of glue about 3 or 4 intersections into the pattern. Grab your pick. I like to kind of smush the glue underneath that intersection. And now I can weave it down and back. There it is. Once you get the rattan strand through, use 2 hands, pull at the same time, and shift the strand on top of the old strand. Now I'll get a little more glue there. Make space. Remove the pick. 2 hands, shift it on. This loop right here, it's going to want to twist. So I'm keeping my finger here just as a guide to encourage it to move straight through. And then the last intersection. Give it just the slightest tug and snip. So be sure to remove your tool once you see the new strand peeking up. Then you can grab with 2 hands. If it's not wanting to ride up on top of the old strand quite yet, you can just shift it in place. Be sure to protect this piece and keep it from twisting all the way to the end. And then just keep moving up. It is fiddly, but you'll get the hang of it. Get right up to that edge, snip. Good as new. You might notice these little fibers sticking up. You don't want to pull these, they could break your cane. You could go and snip every single one and there's usually a lot more on the bottom. But we came across something that'll really save you a lot of time. Whatever the beard trimmers didn't get, I'm gonna go ahead and clip manually. I've heard of some chair caners taking flame to the seat. It works well for them. I don't want to put flame to a seat. So the beard trimmers work really well for us. I'm gonna sit this in front of the fan. It's gonna dry and be super tight, and I'll show you what it's like all done. So there is more than one way to cane a chair. This is how we like to do it. This is a very simple little chair, and hopefully all your chairs go as well as this one did. Thanks for watching the Silver River Chairs channel. Visit our website and find out lots of information about the museum, the classes, and restorations. Check out our social media sites. We are on Facebook as Silver River Center for Chair Caning and on Instagram at Silver River Chairs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.